Welcome to your Bible guide. We're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 26 today. And we've been studying the story of the Israelites being taken out of captivity from Egypt by the amazing hand of God working through Moses. And so we've led them out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, wandering through the wilderness, God bringing water out of a rock, food kind of coming down from the sky in the form of manna, sending them birds and stuff as well. And finally, they've arrived back to the mountain of God. Remember, the mountain of God was the place where God originally visited Moses in the burning bush and said, "Hey, you're going to know I'm God because I'm going to bring you back here." So they're finally back there. They're at the base of the mountain, and there's like this fire on the mountain. There's clouds, there's smokes, there's trembling, there's rumblings. The people are at the base. They can't cross certain thresholds, or else they're gonna die. And so this is kind of this amazing moment here, and we're gonna get to a section that probably most people have some familiarity with, and that is the Ten Commandments. And so we're gonna jump in here and start looking at chapter 20, verse 1. So here's what it says. And God spoke all these words, saying, okay, and so he's about to get in there. We call the Ten Commandments, that phrase is not actually in the Bible. Just so you know, there is a section, I think it's in Deuteronomy 34, and or maybe it's later on in Exodus 34, but it's actually the 10 words is kind of how the Jewish description describes it, the Hebrew description. Anyway, it says, and God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. So remember, God is meeting with Moses up on the mountain, and God is giving these things to Moses to give to the people. Okay, I am the Lord your God. Okay, notice Lord, again, is all capitals, which means this is the name for God, Yahweh. So he's being very specific here. He's not just like, hey, I'm just this random God. Like, I am Yahweh your God, right? Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And so this is brought up time and time again of almost like, hey, here's why you should listen to me, right? I'm the one who brought you out of slavery. I'm the one who did this. Okay, and so we get in the next verse here, verse 3. It says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Right? Like, I am Yahweh. I'm your God. Um, and you should have no other gods before me. So we get this forbidding of any loyalty towards any other gods. Okay, and so he is the prime being, the one you have to worship, the one you have your loyalty with. And remember, in their time, like it's a little bit different for us because we don't really have a lot of competing gods, at least in the U.S. Where I am at, you go in other countries, and that's not the case. But at least for us, most of us have grown up with this kind of concept of monotheism, where that just means one God. And so, but in theirs, everyone would have had their own deity, right? Hey, we got this one over here, we got this one over here. Which one do I follow? Oh, the one who won the military battle, that must be the greater God, right? That was kind of how they thought. And so as God is giving these instructions to Moses, it's really this foundational concept for their whole society. In a way, it's kind of like their constitution, right? So they were slaves, and now they're coming out, and they're trying to be established as a nation again. And so, in a way, God is giving these like ground rules to help them understand and help them really grow as a nation. And like I said, in a way, it functions like their constitution. Okay, and so I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Okay, so first thing, right? There's no other ones. There's no other ones. Verse 4, next one. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Okay, now so they would have had this concept. We see these three layers of like, hey, you can't make a carved image, and then there's three layers. There's heaven above, earth beneath, water below. They kind of had this three-tiered system of their cosmology, which is how they looked at the world, right? And so that's kind of how they picture. You got the heavens, you got the earth, and then the kind of the stuff underneath it. And so you can't make any carved, like no images. Like there's no representation from anything else, because God doesn't want that. Because if you're making a representation of something, that's a created thing, and God's like, no, you can only worship me, right? I'm the only one, and don't make these carved things because you're going to substitute the real thing for this carved image. And so you can't have anything like that. Verse 5, it says, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers of the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments." Right? And so in a sense, what he's saying in here is like, hey, okay, obviously an individual shouldn't bow down and worship other stuff, but there's also kind of this corporate sense, right? "I'm the Lord your God, I'm jealous, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third, fourth generation of those who hate me." And there's this kind of corporate sense of their understanding, at least as a nation of Israel, right? So remember, like this is this nation that's forming, that's coming out of slavery, and God is trying to help them understand. So there's this corporate sense of putting their faith and trust in God through the generations, right? Not just this kind of one-time deal. Verse 7, the next one. "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." And so a lot of people growing up may have thought this verse is talking about, when they say using the Lord's name in vain, using God as a curse word, right? And so, and you hear this all throughout society, all throughout our culture. Something bad happens, and they'll use God's name as kind of a cuss word. Okay, they'll stub their toe, they'll use it, right? And this would apply to this, but I don't think that is the main intent of this verse. The idea of taking the Lord's name in vain is as his people, we're supposed to follow him. We're supposed to we're supposed to do the things he wants us to. And when we take his name and then do things that don't represent him, that's really at the heart of taking the Lord's name in vain. Okay, like it would be saying his name is a curse word. That would apply, but that's not the heart. The heart is God has called this people, and they're kind of like wearing this. Like, for example, I'm wearing this shirt that says Sojourn Alliance. I've also been part of sports teams, and you have the logo across, right? And so when I'm wearing that logo, in a way, I'm representing the organization, the person, whatever it may be, for that. And if I don't represent them very well, it's kind of like taking their name in vain, right? And so as comparatively as followers of Jesus now, when we don't act in the way of Jesus, that's like taking his name in vain, right? Because I'm not representing him very well. And so this is actually a really, really big thing. I don't have tons of time to go further into this and stuff, but anyway, let's jump into verse 8. The next one. "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." Okay, now this was like foundational. So we're gonna see these first handful of ones. The first four are about our relationship with God. Okay, about the people's relationship with God. They're all kind of upward, right? Okay, here's the Lord. Don't have any other gods. Don't make any idols. Don't carve any images. Right? Don't take his name in vain. And this one is remember the Sabbath. And this one kind of has this functional thing. Like, remember, each culture has this rhythm of life, okay, where you work, you eat, maybe you rest, maybe you don't rest. And God, for this nation, wants them to remember, like, God has this rhythm of life that he has set up for them. And part of that is the Sabbath. And this goes all the way back to the creation account, where God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Okay, remember, humanity was created on the sixth day, and so their first full day of their lives was a day that, celebrating the day of rest with God. And so he's cooked this into this culture and this nation where they're supposed to be remembering, right? And this is one of the 10 biggies, right? This is like, hey, these 10 things are the foundational things about your culture, about your nation, that's going to help you walk in the blessing of God. Right? So it starts with God, who he is, how we relate to him. And then also this one is like, hey, here's how we understand our rhythm of life. And part of that rhythm is taking a day off each week to celebrate the Sabbath, to have this day of rest where we focus on God and rest and restoring a relationship. And so this is really an important thing. Okay, verse 9, it says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, right? It's not just like, hey, you get a rest for, just because you're tired. It's like, no, this is to the Lord. Okay, this is for him, or dedicated for him. It's for you, but it's dedicated to him. Um, and so it's a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who's within your gates. And so not only are you not supposed to work, like if you have servants, if you have people living around you, like they have to follow this too, right? This is like basically a national rule. This is something that you have to do. And it says even your livestock, right? So even your animals take it off, okay? And then he alludes to the creation account. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Holy just means set apart, so it's set apart. Okay, next we're going to move into, so these first four, maybe it's five. I have to do my math here. Anyway, the first handful are really directed towards God and rhythm of life and stuff. And now we're going to get some that are really focused on how to interact with each other. Okay, and here's how it starts. Verse 12, it says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in that land that the Lord your God has given you. Right? And so he moves from this idea of Sabbath and rest and stuff like that. And then he moves on to the family dynamic. Okay? One of the things that God has done for the good of society is has the idea of family. Okay? So even from the very beginning, we had Adam and Eve, and God performed the first marriage between the two of them. And then they start having kids. They start having family. And so this is a really foundational thing to any society is family. Okay, and this is where we have kind of culture wars and stuff going on and trying to redefine the family and stuff like that. And it's important to kind of look to say God has set things up in a certain way. Not that some of these other things can't necessarily work, but God has this concept of like, hey, here's a family, and part of this idea in the family says honor your father and mother, right? If basically kids go rogue and just do whatever they want, any society, any culture is gonna have problems, right? And so this first kind of concept of like, hey, now we were looking at God and our relationship with Him. Now we're kind of looking at people, and he starts with this idea of like, hey, here's how the dynamic should be in the family, and of utmost importance is how do the kids treat mom and dad? And so it says to honor your father and mother. Right? You're supposed to honor them. You're supposed to have them up. You're supposed to listen to them. You're supposed to obey them. Right? And so any culture has this idea of like, hey, someone has to be in charge and control. Someone has to have these rules and stuff that are obeyed. And if obedience in the law isn't kept, it's chaos. Right? And look at this one, actually has a promise to it. It says that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God has given you. Right? Like this is gonna work well for you, for the people if you guys do this. Okay, next one, verse 13, it says, "You shall not murder." Okay, now this is obviously a very important rule, and the word for murder here is it's not this idea of you shall not ever kill anything. Okay, so they had this, and we'll see later in the law. Remember, this is just kind of the highlights of the law that everything else is under, and then there's later we're going to get 613 kind of case laws for this, right? And so some of this stuff is actually going to be judicial in some sense, right? So not only is like, hey, here's some nice advice. Like, no, this has some judicial bearing on it when you guys incorporate as this nation, that you're going to have to uphold these, and someone's going to have to uphold these. Okay, and so you shall not murder is like you can't take innocent life. Right? So this doesn't apply to war, doesn't apply to capital punishment, and I'm not going to get into the, if those are okay or not, but this is just what the word is like you can't just kill someone for an innocent person for no reason, is the idea here. Okay? Which most cultures throughout the world, probably everyone, has this idea. Like you just can't go and kill someone for no reason. Okay? That's we have this sense. Okay? Part of that goes to we're all made in the image of God. We all have value, and so you can't just go and do this to someone else. Okay, next one. Okay, you shall not commit adultery. Okay, and so this is kind of going back to this foundational thing of family. If this family is the foundation of a culture and a society, you can't have mass disobedience by kids all over the place, but you also cannot have adultery. Um, you can't have marriages that are broken up by having adultery and stuff. And so this is another really important thing if you're going to have this core foundation on this family between a husband and a wife and their kids and stuff. If that's the dynamic you're going for, adultery breaks that, right? And so it breaks down the fabric of a society that's going to work. And so this is one of those problems that we see. And so therefore, God has given Moses this command. Okay, verse 15: You shall not steal. Okay, you can't take other people's stuff, right? So if you're going to live around a people, and again, most of these are so, I don't want to say obvious to our society, because we've really built, in many places we've built off of these laws, built off of these commandments, right? And so it's like, oh yeah, this is no brand. But just think, if you're in the midst of a people of a nation, you can't have people taking other people's stuff, right? Like that's just not going to work. That's not going to build a society that's sustainable if everyone can just take each other's stuff. And so this is built in here. The next one: You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, and so a lot of people will just kind of like, oh, this is just talking about lying. Okay, and it is lying, right? Because bearing false witness would be a lie. But this has some more judicial ramifications, right? So this is kind of thinking in a court of law, like you can't just be like, hey, that guy did this when he didn't, right? So that's bearing a false witness. So if we're interacting as a society, remember, so this is later on, like, hey, how can any nation society thrive? Okay, you're going to have to do these commandments. You're going to have to do, as they say in another spot, the 10 words. You're going to have to do these and fulfill these. And so if you have people just bearing false witness, lying about others, especially in a judicial sense, you're not going to have a society and a culture that's sustainable, because you're not going to know, what's what, right? And so you really need to have this understanding of you can't bear false witness, okay, against your neighbor. You can't just say anything you want about, right? Like I said, at a simple sense, yeah, it is lying, but like I said, it has this judicial kind of consequence as you're living with people. Okay, the last one, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. And so remember, as we're living together, as we're building a nation together, and you have your neighbor over there, you can't just always want everything that they have. Okay, and I see this is a big issue in most places. Is like, hey, that you got the haves and the have-nots, and then there's kind of these battles between the two, and this is trying to talk about, like, you can't covet, you can't desire, and just want all the stuff that your neighbor has. Okay, and so you can't just go and, like, desire and try to get those things, and you obsess of it, and then what you might do because of your covenants, that's going to lead you to do things against them, right? And so that's foundational for a society. Like, if I want this person's stuff, and maybe I become violent and I take it by force, or and so a lot of these things is really, how do people live together, right? So if people are going to live together, we have this idea that it starts with family. And so we have this idea of honoring your father and mother. You can't just go and take people's lives for no reasons. That's called murder. You can't commit adultery. You can't, harm the family unit, the marriage. You can't take people's stuff. You can't lie about them. You can't, in the court of law, do false witness against your neighbor. And then you can't covet their stuff, because if you do that, you're going to do things and make decisions that are going against the community, going against your nation. And we see kind of nations rise and fall. And a lot of it is based on this. Like, you go to places that are corrupt, and I've been to a bunch of different countries, and I'm not gonna like name drop them of which ones I think do not abide by this. But I tell you what, if you go to certain places and they are not abiding by these commandments, they are usually often corrupt places. Okay, and also often lots of poverty, lots of things like that, and there's there's a big dynamic of of you know um, just how nations work and why some are successful, why some are not. But I tell you what, if, as a foundational level, if you don't have this stuff, I mean, you really just have a hard time of functioning as a nation. Okay, verse 18, it says, "Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flash of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off." Right? And so remember, all the people down at the base of the mountain, Moses went up and he's talking to God, and God's giving these commandments, and all the people are just watching and seeing just all the different things that are just described here. And it says, the people stood far off and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Remember, part of the dynamic that God said he wanted is, I want a whole nation of a kingdom of priests. This group of people that's going to interact with God, and we see a hesitancy of the people. Okay, I know there was like different rules and stuff for them, like not going to the mountain, but we kind of see them like, "Hey Moses, how about you deal with God, and we'll just be down here." Okay, but Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you might not sin." Right, and so part of this whole experience is remember, sinning is basically breaking the commandments. Okay, it's breaking the law. And so God's saying, hey, God has given you this experience, exposure and stuff that you're seeing this mountain and his presence there in a special way, and he's giving these commands, and he's trying to help you understand that God is he kind of means some business here, right? Hey, if we're going to be this nation that follows him, we're going to have to do these things, and you have to see God. And this idea of fear is not like, oh, I'm afraid, like a scary movie afraid, but it's like, hey, God is going to hold us accountable for these things. And we see that he's powerful and that he can, right? Just like if you're driving down the street and all of a sudden you see, a cop car pull behind you. Okay, at least for me, I'm like, okay, am I following the law? Am I speeding? I make sure I use my blinkers. I'm not afraid of the cop that he's necessarily going to come and get me, but the cop has authority, and he's been given authority to where if I'm breaking the law, he can hold me accountable, right? So if I'm speeding, if I'm going 20 miles over the speed limit, he's going to flip on his lights, he's going to pull me over, he's going to ask for my information, and then he's probably going to give me a ticket because he kind of has that authority. And so we're seeing that God is establishing this sense of authority, that they need to see God as a God who has authority, right? So they may not sin. Right? And that's kind of this idea of fear. So the people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Okay, just an amazing encounter. Verse 22, it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen me for yourselves, that I have talked with you from heaven." Right? Remember, they had that three tier, from heaven to earth, and then kind of this underworld area under the earth. So you've seen me yourselves, that I've talked to you from heaven. Right? Like he came down from heaven and on this mountain. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor you shall make for yourselves gods of gold. Because commonly how the people on the world would do is like, okay, we have this God, and so then we're going to make the idol for him, and it'll be kind of this representation of him, and maybe God will inhabit this idol in a special way, and then we bring things to the idol to give us luck, to give us blessing, and that's not how they're supposed to work with that. Okay, but here's what they're supposed to do. It says, "An altar of earth you shall make for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings and your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you." Right? So here's how you're supposed to interact. Don't make idols, but we're going to set up things for sacrifices that kind of show our interactions together. Okay, and later on in the law, there's going to get all these laws about how to deal with God. Right? How to interact with them. Do I do this? Do I do this? Can I eat this? Can I wear this? Anyway, so there's, like I said, 613 kind of laws that are about that. So if you make for me, verse 25, "If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you may profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be not exposed on it." Right? So it's getting this idea of like, hey, we got to be mindful when we come to God. Right? There's this sense, and I think some of our North American churches has lost this a little bit. There's this sense of awe and reverence that God has. and that we need to remember. Okay, we kind of have this concept of buddy Jesus, and Jesus is our best friend, and some of those ideas are in Scripture, right? Like we are in good relationship with God. There's nothing to fear. He's we get this concept of father. We get this concept of a friend. And so but there's also concepts of like, man, God is holy. God is other. God is going to hold us accountable for our sins. God's going to gives us laws and rules that we have to obey Him. And He's God, and we're lesser, right? Like so we get this sense of God is greater, we're lesser. Because a lot of times when we think of friendships, we think of equality, right? And especially in the Western world, there's a big sense of equality. We need to tolerate everyone because everyone's the same in some ways. And in some ways, that's okay because like in value, how is a person more valuable than another person, right? We all are made in His image, and so we do have that value. But remember, God is higher than us, though. God is greater, and He's given us commandments that we're supposed to obey and we're supposed to follow. And so just know, like all the 10 Commandments, we're going to see a bunch of other laws and rules that He's going to say, hey, here's the laws for Israel. And some of those, we're going to look at and we're like, those are these ceremonial ritual laws, and we don't really practice those anymore. But some of these are moral laws, like in the 10 Commandments here, the 10 words, that we have to continue and follow. And these are things that we still today should do. We still should honor our father and mother. We still should not steal. We still should not commit adultery. We still should keep all these things. Like all of these are in some ways things that we should abide in certain ways. Okay, we don't necessarily have to do it culturally just like the Jews did because we're not Jews, but they are things that we need to look at. But it mostly falls under like, who is God, and then how do we relate to Him, right? First handful of commandments, and then the last handful, how do we relate to others? And if we're living that out, we're going to be able to walk in the ways of God.